Well, Budget 2023 is done and dusted. There is something for everyone that the Finance Minister has been able to put on the table. Haven't heard any disappointed voices through the morning that we've been covering Budget 2023. Joining me now on the program, Sanjeev Krishan of PwC, also with us Vinay Dube of Akasa Airlines, and Christian of Moody's, Christian Guzman of Moody's. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the show. Christian, let me start by asking you, the Finance Minister making it clear that the government intends to stick to the path of fiscal consolidation. There is no deviation, sub 6% for FY24 and committed to 4.5% by FY26. Christian, what do you make of the budget presented by the Union government?
Great. Thanks for having me. Yes, I think we see it as a positive that there has been no deviation from that medium-term commitment to that fiscal deficit target. But that doesn't necessarily mean the pathway to get to that target is any clearer. We have seen some gains with regards to revenue administration, and the overall budgetary envelope has pulled back a little. So we have a combination of buoyant revenue and lower spending, and the quality of that spending has increased because of the capital expenditure outlays. But what about how will the next 2 years, how are you going to get from 5.9% to 4.5%? That remains a bit unclear to us.
Given the kind of revenue buoyancy that we have seen, Christian, as well as the quality of expenditure, do you believe that that would sufficiently help the government move towards that number of 4.5%?
Well, I think it really does depend on the reforms that would perhaps come or are going to be introduced after we see the election. I think the market does accept that this is an election year budget with something for everybody, but that also means some of the more difficult types of reforms that would lead to even more material gains in revenue, are perhaps, not exactly politically feasible at the moment. So I think how we get, how the sort of fiscal outlook shapes up after 2024 is going to be key to getting to that target.
Well, let me bring Sanjeev Krishan into the conversation. Sanjeev, on balance, what's the big headline for you as far as Budget 2023 is concerned? What do you take away from this?
So, first of all, Shireen, thank you for having me. In Davos, we spoke about our CEO survey, which said that 57% Indian CEOs are reasonably positive about India, even though they may have misgivings about the world. I think after the budget, hopefully that number would rise. I hope that 75% at the minimum. I think as was just being said, I think the budget has a little bit for everybody. It is an inclusive budget, but I think the standout really is the continued focus on capital expenditure. I think one of the things which sort of stands out also is the fact that unlike last year when we believed that there were certain buffers in the budget, it seems that most of those have been baked in. Yes, there could be certain buffers because the fertilizer subsidy may not turn out the way it is. It could be lower, but there is too much uncertainty at this point in time. So I would say it's a reasonable budget. I think 5.9% should be achievable based on where we see things today at this point in time. The fact that when we're talking about transitions and we talk about supply chain transitions and we speak about green transitions, I think the fact that there is something in it for both those transitions that India Inc. is facing, I think is an enabler, because we want to transition green, we want to transition in a way that the supply chain is nearshored. A large part of that nearshoring of the supply chain is my MSME sector, and I think that to me is a standout.
Well, yes, there is, of course, a significant outlay as far as capex is concerned, a 33% higher outlay there, and separately 35,000 crores for the green energy transition towards OMCs. But Vinay Dube of Akasa, let me bring you in. Tourism, mission mode, that was the big announcement that came in from the Finance Minister, and even as far as airports and regional connectivity is concerned, the budget did make references to that. What do you take away? What is this going to mean? We've already seen domestic passenger traffic return to pre-COVID levels. What's the expectation on the back of what the budget has announced?
I think it's going to continue to help travel and tourism in general. In fact, there was a particular call out for both domestic and foreign tourism, which will work wonders for aviation. As far as infrastructure and capital spend, as you said, 50 more airports, which is fantastic. I think the focus on green growth, as you know, we pride ourselves in being the world's, or certainly India's most greenest airline, which really is near and dear to our heart. I think there was also a call out for inclusive development, in particular continued empowerment of women. And as you know, something that India takes great pride in is leading the world as far as women pilots are concerned. So I think this is going to continue to help boost aviation travel demand, which is great for airlines, and that in turn will help hopefully underpin our economic growth engine.
Krishan, I want to come back to you on the budget numbers, the budget math, and there is consensus that these are credible, pragmatic, real numbers, both in terms of what the government has estimated and what the government has been able to deliver as well. What has been the standout numbers? Of course, everyone's talking about the big capex allocation increase of 33%, but what have been some of the other key numbers that you've been focused on?
I didn't get, were you directing that to me or somebody else?
No. Krishan, can you hear me? Well, we seem to have lost that line with Krishan, but yeah. Yes, that is for you, Krishan. I was asking you about the credibility of the numbers, consensus that these are credible, pragmatic, real numbers, not just for FY24, but what the government has been able to deliver as well. What have been the big standout numbers that you focused on?
Sure. I think first is that revenue take. And here, once again, it's been said, it's the revenue buoyancy, and it's that ongoing traction with regards to things like GST and digitization and making the tax administration more efficient. And here we have seen that the tax revenue as a share of GDP, according to our calculations, rise from 6.8% to around 7.7% of GDP. So I think that 1 percentage point rise over the past 4 or 5 years, I think is quite large and very positive in terms of how we see fiscal sustainability. We still have a problem with very large debt, and you do need to service that debt, and so having much more revenue so that you can afford those very large outlays on capex while also servicing your debt. Now that's been very positive. So I do want to highlight that increased tax revenue take.
Yes, and that's a point well made. Tax to GDP ratio has gone up to 7.8% of GDP. That's the word coming in from Moody's. But Sanjeev, when you usually pore over the fine print, there are some demons that emerge. So far, with the exception of what's happened as far as the insurance space is concerned with the changes and the impact on insurance companies and something for ultra-rich housing, there doesn't seem to have been anything else that's disturbed sentiment too much. Anything that's caught your eye?
Yeah, I think generally that's been the case. I think we've been reading something about the startups that, the startup valuations, if anything comes beyond the fair market value from foreign investors, that is also going to be considered taxable. I think that's the interpretation that we have at this point in time. I think that was for, the domestic investors, possibly now going to be also for the foreign investors. If that is indeed the case, if I'm reading it right, then that may be a bit of a negative from a startup ecosystem standpoint. Because, as you know, we are actually still dependent, the startup ecosystem is still widely dependent on foreign capital, even as the domestic market comes through. But yeah, broadly, I think, everything that we have seen so far seems very, very encouraging on the budget. Since you mentioned, I do want to call out 2 specific numbers, which I think were stark for me. I mean, if you look at the overall numbers, the amount of enhancements that you have had across the transport segment and the railways, these are very, very sharp increases, which are there. I think transport increase almost 25%, the railways increases possibly even more. And I think these are very stark numbers. And, in some ways, it goes to, we keep talking about how we have the logistics costs and some others, which are really, preventing India from being the producer to the world. And, in some ways, if we can control the logistics cost, that will enable a lot of Indian manufacturing to stand out, which is what we've been trying to do through PLI and others. But yeah, except for the startup one, no other negatives that I've spotted so far.
Sanjeev, specifically on the startup valuation aspect that you brought up, because we do have the secretaries coming in shortly, so we'll try and get a clarification. What exactly is the provision that the budget has made which worries you?
So basically, if you get in foreign money beyond the fair market value, then our interpretation is that again is income for the company and hence subject to tax. That was the case for domestic investors. It appears from the reading of the budget documents that even if you get foreign money, that is also now going to be considered income for the company and hence taxable. That's the interpretation that we have at the moment.
Okay, all right. We'll try and get clarifications from the secretaries when they join us. Vinay Dube, where does this leave Akasa's investment plans, fleet expansion? This is also the year of G20. What can we now expect from you?
Shirin, I think you should expect nothing different from what we have already communicated, which I think is ambitious enough. I don't think there's an airline in the history of global aviation that has put out an more ambitious plan. We're up at 17 aircraft already. We've put in our order of 72 aircraft that will be delivered by March. I think the budget supports that. You asked, what is the most exciting number? For me, the most exciting number that the Honorable Finance Minister put out was not related to the budget. It was an estimate of 7% of economic growth in the current year. As you know, air travel is very closely linked to economic growth development as well as the improvement in GDP per capita. And I think that's all pointing in the right direction. So for Akasa is really just an ability to execute our plan continues to get better and better and more exciting as the economy continues to gather steam and momentum. And I think this budget will certainly help in that aspect.
Well, Krishan, before I let each one of you go, as far as the growth assumptions are concerned, 6.5% and 10.5% nominal, what do you make of the growth estimates?
Well, if I could start then, I think the 6.5% does perhaps balance some of the challenges that we are seeing with regards to the global economic outlook. We at Moody's are still calling for recessions in both the U.S. and Europe in the euro area. So I think that says a lot about, I guess, that those external challenges. But yet we do think that the domestic economic conditions in India are going to be somewhat robust and resilient to those external headwinds. Having said that, perhaps the 10.5% nominal GDP assumption is fairly conservative, given where we have inflation at the moment. So I think if you sort of juxtapose that to the entire year, the government is basically implying that there will be a large sort of deceleration in the inflationary pressures over the course of the next fiscal year.
Well, yes, that is certainly the expectation that we could see inflation cooling quite significantly, but a thumbs up coming in from industry and, of course, Moody's. Krishan, many thanks for joining us. Vinay Dube and Sanjeev Krishan, a pleasure having you here on CNBC TV18 with your thoughts on what Budget 2023 means for the economy, means for India and for growth. We are going to take a break, ladies and gentlemen. Don't go anywhere. In a short while from now, the budget makers, the budget architects will join us right here, live in our studios, to answer your questions and get clarification on the budget fine print.
Invest once and enjoy guaranteed